Anna Catherine Meehling, formerly Schofield, here in Marshall, Illinois. And I'm going to interview Mrs. Meehling. How many years have you lived in this community?
Well, I've lived here all my life, which is 77 years, soon to be 78. I was born at 702 North 8th Street, born in the living room of that house. It's still standing there. Can't think who lives there now, but it used to be, Jim Bennett lived there for a long time. And my parents lived. I grew up there.
What year were you born in?
1926.
Can you name your parents and,
oh, yeah,
and your siblings?
My parents were John and Opal Schofield. Mother was Opal Richards. Her dad was a Methodist minister. They lived in the south part of town, right across from the American Legion Hall. The house is no longer there. And my dad grew up, there was a big old house that his parents built on just across the alley there from where we lived, the old Schofield house. It was a big old brick house, and there was a barn out in back of it that had stalls in it for horses, and it originally, years ago, it was practically farmland because there was a little smokehouse, I remember, that there smoked hams. It was almost like a farm. But then the house had run down, nobody kept it up, and it was kind of considered a haunted house there for a while. But I used to play around there a lot.
What about your childhood? Schooling and your friends?
I always played hard and played around the neighborhood, rode the bicycle up and down, went to this North school, and either walked or rode the bike to school. And during the winter, I don't think we ever had snow days. We liked to school in the deepest snow. I usually had a friend lived across the street. And before I started the school, Betty Amaker lived there, John Amaker and his family, and Betty was a good friend of mine. But then they moved to the south part of town. Later on, there was somebody named Doris Bell about my age I played with, and her dad was her brother was Hal Bell, but they were in the grocery business and were related to the Moys. And they made potato chips at one time up above the grocery store, which was on the corner there, 7th Archer.
How about
then later on, Martha Prince moved into that house. And she was a good friend of mine. Martha Herschel Prince was her dad, and he worked for Kirchner Lumberyard. We had a lot of good times. We even played around in that old Schofield house and played like we had an office at each end and made a telephone with 2 tin cans and a cord to talk to each other. I think we smoked a cigarette there a time or two, too.
When did you get married?
We were married in 1951. I married Bill Meehling. William Meehling, who's an attorney here in town, and we have 3 children, Mindy, Tom, and Bill. The boys are twins.
How about your siblings?
Oh, my siblings were Betty. Betty Lou was my older sister, 6 years older, and my brother was Warren Schofield, who is now deceased. He was 8 years older than I am. I remember the house that we lived in very well, and like on Christmas, I can think of getting up. We couldn't wait to go downstairs to see the Christmas tree on the Christmas morning, but you had to wait till the furnace. Dad went down and fired up the coal furnace, and would get the house warm. Coal was always delivered to our house, and truck backed up, and the coal went down the coal chute into the coal bin. As a kid, I remember watching them deliver the coal. In the same way, in the summer, we got ice was delivered to us for the ice box.
Has the neighborhood changed much?
Well, yes, the old Schofield house was torn down, I think, about 1940 or something like that, maybe 44 maybe. And early 40s, I think. And the houses were built up. John Lewis bought the house and then subdivided it. There's the houses now that stand there. Rosa McKinney's house, and Joanne Finkminer, Fern Pierce. All these houses were where the old Schofield house stood. And as I say, there were vacant lots mostly around that house. Even when I was little, there were no houses right behind us. Later, Mr. Sampson built a house directly behind ours, and Bob Wilson built a house down on the farther down on 7th Street.
Do you have any special memories of your school?
Oh, we had good times at school. I enjoyed school.
Have any favorite teacher?
I remember Miss Spangler in the 3rd grade, I think, and Helen Eimel about the 7th grade, and Bertha Conemacher, I think, was the principal, and she was a very good teacher. And Mrs. Washburn, we were all afraid of her, but she was pretty strict, principal of the school. I recall doing an art project one time in the 8th grade. Richard LaRue and I made stained glass windows, and they put them in the top story of the, I think it was the 3rd floor, windows facing the south. We made them with colored cellophane papers. And later on, Richard LaRue died in the service. He went into the service, and his plane was shot down over near, I forget, near Japan, somewhere.
What about high school? Do you have any special memories of it?
Well, I was the class president the freshman year, but I guess I went downhill after that. I didn't hold office after that, but one of my good friends was Charlotte Wilson, who was a neighbor, and we were close friends. And my other buddies were Phyllis LaRue, Donna Rollison, and Betty Metzger, Mary Kay Prevost. Mary Kay and I had some good times. One time we were little, we built a little car with that lumber and put wheels on it and pushed each other around. But we thought we should have had a motor in it, but we couldn't figure out how to put a motor in it. We used to go down to the corner drugstore, which was on the corner there of 7th and Archer at one time. That was the Walgreens. Split a milkshake. She'd pay a dime, I'd pay 15, or vice versa. They were a quarter apiece. I read the comic books for her.
Do you have any favorite high school teachers or subjects?
Oh, let's see. Miss Goff was our Latin teacher. I thought she was good. Mr. Holler always was interesting, and he would always get off the subject, history, talk about the war. He fought the Battle of Valparaiso, we always said. He was stationed there during World War I, I guess.
I'm especially interested in knowing about your dating when you were in high school.
Well,
and after.
I don't know that I dated a whole lot, but I went to the junior prom with Dean Hutchins, I think when he was a junior or senior and I was a freshman, and I don't remember much about it, really. But then later I went with, I think I dated Morris McDaniel, whose dad was Claude McDaniel, the state's attorney at the time. We went to the junior prom, I think, but the senior prom, he was called into the service before the end of the school year. Several of the boys went to the service because of the war. As I said, Richard LaRue and Morris, I don't know, several went to the service early.
What about any jobs you had?
Well, after high school, I worked at I went to St. Louis to work. I passed the civil service exam and worked there for about a year during the war in the St. Louis Ordnance Depot, where we typed up requisitions for military supplies. It was a military headquarters, and they had a prisoner camp in the same facility there, and sometimes in the cafeteria we would see these Italian prisoners. They would be working in the cafeteria. Most of them were Italians. Then I decided to come back. Charlotte went down there with me, Charlotte Wilson, and my sister was already living there. So we all roomed in the same hotel for women in St. Louis, not too far from Union Station. It was an experience being in the city for a while. But I was homesick, I guess. I came back to Marshall. We came back, Charlotte and I. My sister stayed. Charlotte married Bob Hedges shortly after that, and I got a job at the Delaney Bank. And I worked there for 6 years before Bill and I got married.
Do you have any special historical event memories?
Marshall, I always think of my grandfather as being a very important person. My grandfather Schofield was a lawyer who grew up, I think he was raised around Martinsville. And then all of his family took the western route and went to, I suppose, I don't know whether covered wagon or not. They went to Oregon anyway when all that migration was going west. And he stayed with and lived with an uncle. Then he went, I guess he went to school here in Marshall. Then he went to Louisville for his law degree. And he practiced law here, and then I don't know whether elected, appointed to the Illinois Supreme Court, and served on the Illinois Supreme Court for 20 years.
Was he the Chief Justice?
I think he was Chief Justice, but I'm not sure. Anyway, he was approached by President Grover Cleveland to become Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. And I'm sure this was long before my time, so I never did know him. But he refused on the grounds his family wouldn't want to leave Marshall. It was such a beautiful town to raise children. He had 8 children, I think, at that time, and eventually had 10 children. And his wife would not leave, and he said he couldn't leave without her. So he did not accept the appointment. There were 10 in the family, but there's no more Schofields around here anymore.
Do you think of anything more about your life? What about your hobbies? What have you done?
Well, I think I've always enjoyed artwork, and when
you've painted quite a lot, haven't you?
Yes, I enjoy painting. I think it was in the 60s, maybe. Juanita Blankenship opened up an art class and had Mildred Stewart from Paris came down and taught an art class. And I thought, well, I don't know, I'll try to get in it. And there were about a dozen people, I suppose, from Marshall. It started the Marshall Art League. began painting that way. And later, we all, several of us, when Mildred didn't come anymore, she stayed in Paris, we would go to her house for classes for several years. June Bubeck was, and Doris Murphy were among the ones that went up there. Barb Martin and, I don't know now, let's see. But we enjoyed those art classes very much, and I still paint some.
Well, have you, what about your favorite books? Have you had any reading experiences?
Oh, I don't know. About favorites, when I was a kid, I thought Treasure Island and, I wasn't prepared for that one.
Do you read?
I read quite a lot, yes, and I've been active in the library, was on the library board for a while, and I'm still a member of the Friends of the Library.
Do any other community services?
I deliver Meals on Wheels every Wednesday.
Do you have any church membership?
Well, I was raised in the Methodist Church, and we had Sunday school classes there, but most of my friends went to that church. And then when I started going with Bill, I became interested in the Catholic Church, and when we were married in the Catholic Church, and I've attended that church ever since.
Is there anything further that you might want to tell about your life?
Well, it's a wonderful little town to live in, I think. I was trying to think of the changes. Of course, changes in our house. The modern conveniences are much greater now than they were. We were, my mom washed on Mondays. It took all day to heat the water and run them clothes through the wringers, and we usually had bean soup on Monday. And I think a lot of people did. And she'd spend a day ironing, you didn't have wash and wear clothes. And our houses weren't as warm, I don't think. We had a furnace in the basement, a coal furnace, and one big register that just heated the whole house. On cold days, you'd go in there and stand over that and just blow the heat up on you. Felt so good. But
I can vouch for the fact that you've become a pretty good cook. Have you cooked most of your life, beginning when?
Well, I don't know. I don't think I learned too much at home. I didn't do a lot of cooking before I got married. I started. The joy of cooking saved us, I guess, for a while. And Campbell soup when I first started. We used to trade at Bill Pierce had a grocery store, but a lot of times my family would trade over there a lot. It was convenient. And over downtown. I don't think of anything else right now, but...
All right. Well, maybe you can add to it if you think of some other things.
Okay.
This morning.
All right.
Thank you very much.
I think I forgot to mention that my dad worked in the post office for many years and retired there about 1940 maybe. He used to tell about in his early days when he was a young man delivering mail on the country route on a bicycle. He worked inside later as I think his position was a money order clerk. He always walked to work, and he walked downtown almost every night. And when I was little, I don't know, grade school age, I would go down. He'd take me with him downtown, and I grew up in the pool room, I think. We'd go in the pool room with him and while he visited, and then he kind of hung out, and he would go down once in a while later, Huey Hornbrook's restaurant, which was on the south side. I forget which building exactly. South side of Archer Avenue. And also he'd sometimes go in Tom Crump's restaurant, which was on the corner there, well, I think where Bishop's is now. There also was a restaurant just on east there on the corner. It was shaped in like a V. And I think, I don't know, Keystone, no, what was that called? Keystone Cafe? I don't know. The Rollisons ran it at one time, I know. And across the street there where Tom's is, I think Charlie Blundell had a restaurant. Because Jim Blundell was in my class, and he had a party down there one time. My dad, John Schofield, died in 1952. And my mother moved into a little house over on Michigan Avenue for a few years. Then she later married Ernest Howe, who lived in a house on South 6th Street. It's the first house, residential house, south of, I guess that's Locust Street. It'd be on 7th at about, I don't know, that corner there. He'd lived there for years and raised his family. But so in their older age, they both married, and I think they lived together 18 years before he died. One of my dad's brothers was Sam Schofield, who was an attorney here in Marshall. He was in with, I think, Bennett's were partners. Their office was, I think the building's no longer there, but it's where the insurance company is now on the corner of 6th and Archer. They were upstairs in that building. My Aunt Jane lived here. She was married to Ross Holler, and they lived on a farm north of town in their younger days, and I remember visiting out there. It was quite a thrill to ride out there in his Model T. He would take us kids out there to play, and we'd play around with Charlie Lau and his family farmed for him, and I remember Miriam Lau was about my age, and sometimes when cousin, the Holler, Aunt Jane had a son named Lou Holler, and when their kids came to visit, we would go out there and play, and up in the hay mound, jump off into the hay, and I know we always had good times going out there. Later on, they moved to town and lived over here on 6th Street. I'm not sure who lives there now. Just a little bit south of the high school. I think Alma Shipe was related to Uncle Ross Holler, and I think she lived with them for a while, and later married Judge Snavely. As I said before, I didn't know my grandfather Schofield. He was so much older. My dad was 15 when he died, which was in 1893. And my dad didn't marry until he was, I think, around 40 or something. So there was quite a gap there in ages. We've always been interested in the Swope Art Gallery in Terre Haute. I served on the Board of Overseers for many years. I think you could serve 2 3-year terms, and then you had to lay off for a while, then you went back on. So I was on there, I think, almost 12 years, and served as a secretary many of those years. This is Kate. I'm testing this machine. I don't know whether this mic works or not. I'm going to interview Bill sometime if I get him down here long enough. Let's see what happens. This is Kate again. I'm just trying to see which is better, using the mic or just the machine by itself. I'll see whether my voice carries better this way or with the mic. See if that makes a difference. Recording level. Here's supposed to... we're recording now, and I want to see if it picks up my voice any better when I have this ALC on. I'm not sure what that means. We'll give it a try.